The Seeker's Compass is an outreach of All Faith Seminary International, and we offer 3 traditional degrees: Interfaith Ministry, Master of Divinity, Doctor of Divinity, as well as an emphasis in a specific area: comparative religions, A Course in Miracles, mysticism, and Judaic studies. As part of the mysticism program, we offer the Seeker's Compass. It's available to all of the students at the seminary as well as the public for a very low or no cost. And the idea is we want to meet and experience the mystical path. That's really our goal in the mysticism program. And one of the most important things is finding out how others have done it. So what we like to do is go out and find people who are on their path, people that are walking towards the divine in one way or another. And one of the fascinating things that we've learned is that the mystics all start to say the same thing. They talk about the experience of the divine. They talk about the awareness of divine presence, the desire to know the heart and mind of God. And they say it in their own language. They say it perhaps a little bit differently or perhaps with a different emphasis. But at the end, we start to realize that the path looks very, very similar. It's very different at the level of what we call form, when we're talking about the difference between Buddhism and Christianity and Judaism, etc. When we're looking at the levels and the layers of religion, there's a structure, and it's very useful. It's very comforting for many, many people. As you go further on that path, you start to realize there's more. And that's what the Seeker's Compass is really all about. What we're going to do, first of all, just a big picture, I'm going to have Dr. Keith lead us through a meditation, and then we will dive into our wonderful discussion with Reverend Dr. Victor Fuhrman. So at this point, I would like to ask Reverend Keith to come forward and lead us in a centering meditation to start our program. Dr. Keith, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. So let's all get settled. Ideally, if you've been here before, you know I like you to try and sit up nice and straight so you can really breathe fully. That's really our goal, right? Is to breathe fully and to really use, our body, mind, and spirit in an integrative fashion here today. So have a firm seat below you. If you're on a very soft chair, try to move toward the front so you're over the frame and your pelvis your sit bones have some support. Take a deep breath, move your shoulders up and back, kind of loosen up that shoulder girdle just a little bit so that your ribs can move and you can breathe. And we'll start breathing, trying to connect to the ground below us, then fill our pelvis up to our abdomen, and we'll breathe all the way up here to above our clavicles and try to get our whole torso kind of filled with a nice, full, deep breath. And slowly we'll come back to the room. Opening your eyes when you're ready. Well, thank you everyone for partaking in that.
Thank you, Keith.
Yes, you're welcome. And so now we're going to move forward with today's program.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate that very much. And I want to say that, by the way, Keith does lead programs every quarter on Kriya Yoga, which is what you just experienced a little bit of. And he is a master meditation mechanic. So if you really want to go deeper into meditation, sign up for some of Keith's classes, and he'll be putting his link in chat so you can participate later. Thank you, Keith.
Thanks, bud.
Absolutely. And it gives me great pleasure to talk about our guest today, Reverend Dr. Victor Fuhrman. He has a fascinating background. He's an interfaith minister, healer, spiritual counselor. He's the host and producer of two popular podcasts on Times Radio, Destination Unlimited and Vox Novus. He's had a day job for 44 plus years before he retired, but he has this wonderful experience of walking in both paths, the quote unquote real world and the world of the mystical path. As a child, he's had several paranormal experiences, including being a UFO contactee, and a number of things have happened to him in his past that really opened him up to his spiritual path, taking him into yoga, meditation, and Reiki healing, which is a wonderful energetic way of doing hands-on, hands-off, long-distance healing. And through a world of synchronicity, which he clearly lives in, he enrolled in the new seminary in 1995, graduated, and was ordained in 97, and took on this dual role of business by day and spiritual service by night. In New York City, he was a spiritual conduit for Paranormal NYC, as well as the New York UFO Meet-up. He went back to the new seminary in 21 and received his doctorate in spiritual direction, and also served as minister of communications for the Interfaith Temple for a number of years. He's the author of Circles and Rings, a collection of poetry from the soul, published in 2024, and the co-author of Pet Prayers and Blessings, which is a book to help pet owners bless their pets and also get through the challenge, which I'm sure many, if not all of us, have had, of pet loss. He's a contributing writer and researcher to Your Interfaith Wedding, the Goddess Pages, Wedding Goddess, and was a key researcher on the book Metaphysician on Call for Better Health. And he and I also spoke about both serving in the Air Force. And with that, I am delighted to ask Reverend Victor to come forward and share with us his spiritual path. Reverend Victor, over to you.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Budd, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. And thank you, Reverend Keith, for that wonderful meditation. I truly love that. I needed that before starting today, so thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm going to start by opening up my PowerPoint presentation. Bear with me for 1 second. So what I'm going to be sharing today is part of the wisdom of Rabbi Joseph Gelberman, who was one of the founders of the new seminary, which ultimately led to All Faiths Seminary International. And the lessons that I learned from him, which kind of confirmed and codified what I had been experiencing in my own life. And the story of how I got to the new seminary is one of synchronicity also, and I'll share that a little bit later on. But one of his main teachings, one of the teachings that had a great influence upon me, was the Hebrew expression hakol b'seda. Now, he used to say that if you would meet someone on the street who was a Jew and who spoke Hebrew, and you ask them, how's life? They would say, hakol b'seda. The literal translation means everything is in order. But Rabbi Gelberman had a deeper understanding of that expression, hakol b'seda. He said it means everything is unfolding in divine order. You may not see it, you may not understand it, you may not like what's going on, but ultimately, if you look with spiritual eyes and take a step back, when everything is done, you'll understand that there was a divine plan, a synchronicity, something in order, because this was something that you were meant to experience in your life, both the good and what we consider on this earthly plane to be the bad. And that lesson just reawakened my understanding of what I had experienced in my life as a series of synchronicities. I believe that the concept that he shared is something that every one of us can relate to in one way or another, that we've had these experiences in our life which perhaps at the time we didn't understand. Perhaps they were wonderful and perhaps not. But that ultimately, in retrospect, there was a reason for everything that took place. be it a synchronicity or a blessing of some kind, or a lesson or a challenge, something that we learned, something that moved us forward in life without our asking for it, because we were meant to have that understanding, that opening, that divine order welcomed into our life. So let's start with a story about this young kid. Oh my goodness, that was me. What a cute kid I was. That picture was taken sometime in middle to late 1953. I was born January of 1953. And this child here was born into a very unusual family, not unusual for the 50s. My mother was born and raised as a Roman Catholic, and my father was raised as a basically non-observant Jew. And when they got together and got married, my mother converted to Judaism, which was the act that most people that had those interfaith marriages back in those days did. And when I was 8 weeks old, my mother took me to my aunt's house, her aunt's house, my Catholic aunt, her Catholic aunt, out in Valley Stream, New York. And while there, her aunt said to her, "You know, you look awfully tired. Why don't you take a nap and we'll look after Victor while you're napping?" So consequently, she did, and she laid down, and they took me, my aunt and my Catholic aunt and cousins took me to their church. And while my mother was napping, they baptized me. So as I joke, and some people might find this slightly offensive, but in the first 8 weeks of my life, I was snipped and dipped, literally snipped and dipped. And she never shared that with me. She never told me about the baptism until actually I was in the Interfaith Seminary, the new seminary in the 1990s. I don't know why she never told me. There was no reason for her not to tell me. But that was a wonderful uncovery. And again, part of this, everything is happening in divine order, the synchronicity, these blessings that come to us when we recognize them. And I'll always be grateful for having all of those opportunities. So let's talk a little bit about some of the unusual things that happened to me in my childhood. The first thing that I remember, consciously remember, I was 5 years old. And I used to have visitors come to me at night and take me to what I called night school. And what night school was instruction in things that I had no other source of information for other than that experience of what I called night school. One of the things that they instructed me upon was electronics. And at 5 years of age, when boys my age wanted toy soldiers and they wanted sporting goods and stuff of that nature, I wanted to build my first radio. And I asked my father if he would get me a kit. There was a couple of companies that sold these kits back in those days that you could put together what was known as a crystal radio. It was basically a galena crystal with a piece of wire called a cat's whisker, and a condenser and coils and things of that nature. And without any training, without any instructions, I took this kit and I built my first crystal radio when I was 5 years old. And I was able to tune in radio stations from New York to Chicago, and it was just fabulous. You would move that little crystal around, the cat's whisker around the galena crystal, and you'd be able to tune into these stations and hear them through a little headset, a little earphone. Old-fashioned earphone that they had back in those days. So this interest in machinery, and especially in electronics, was something that was very profound in my life at that time. And also, being a little bit of a precocious 5 and 6-year-old, I had a difficulty in not wanting to take things apart to see how they worked. And unfortunately, sometimes I would take things apart that were a little more sophisticated than that crystal radio, and I really got stuck trying to put them back together, which displeased my father. And let's say that my relationship with my father at that time was tenuous at best. He had been 20 years older than my mother when they got married, and I never thought that he really loved me. And I thought that he kind of was challenged by my precociousness and by my wanting to find out more about things that it would not be normal for a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old child to find out. I never actually attributed that night school to what they call today extraterrestrials. people from other planets, beings from other galaxies, rather. But that, in retrospect, I think it was. And I think the reason they came was to open me to these possibilities and to open my mind to more than just the worldly things that are taking place in our lives when we're children, especially back then. I was very close with my paternal grandfather, my father's father. He was an observant Jew, and he used to show me the Torah, and he used to teach me things. And one day he pointed at the Torah, and he said, "Do you know what's in that book, in that scroll?" And I said, "Yes, it's the story of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses." He says, "No, it's more than that." He said, "It's everything that ever was or ever will be." I said, "Grandpa, how is that possible, that everything that ever was or ever will be could be in an existing scroll in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses?" He said, "When you're older, you'll understand. You'll need 32 pair of eyes to be able to read what I'm talking about." And I said, "Grandpa, I don't understand." He said, "You will." Well, jump ahead to about the late 1980s, early 1990s. There was a mathematician and scientist by the name of Eliyahu Rips who devised what he called the Torah code. And using 32-bit computer technology, he was able to start finding arrays of letters and words in the Torah, in the Bible, that had different types of information. And one of the famous ones was the name Menachem Begin, who was the president of Israel, and next to it was a cross line that said, "Assassin will assassinate." That's what happened. Now, a lot of people said that it's a random choice, that you could find that and open up any book. You could open up War and Peace and find information like that. But to this day, no one has been able to duplicate. There's been a couple of people who have worked on, followed on the work of Rabbi Rips. But no one's been able to duplicate with any other book the information that he extracted. So how did my grandfather in 1958 know this? Where did that information come to him from? And he always looked at me with a big smile on his face, recognizing something in me that he knew that was something that was in himself, that's something that I inherited from him. When I was 6.5 years old, I was sitting in my room looking at a book, and I looked up, and my grandfather was standing there. And I said, "Grandpa, when did you come in?" He didn't say a word, he just smiled, and then he disappeared. He sort of dissolved and disappeared. And I went into the living room, and my mother and father were there, and I said, "Grandpa was here." And they looked at each other with a strange expression on their face, and then they looked at me. Little did I know, they had not shared with me that my grandfather was actually in the hospital at that time and basically was very ill. 3 minutes later, the phone rang with word of my grandfather's passing. And again, sorrow, but this looking at me like, how did I know? How did I know that Grandpa passed away? This set a tone in my life of information coming to me, either through audio signals, through things that I would hear, things that I would see. I guess you could call them clairvoyance and clairaudience, of events and episodes that were taking place, and information that was provided to me for action purposes. And I'll share a little bit more about that. Let me just go to the next slide. As Reverend Dr. Budd had shared, we shared the service in the United States Air Force almost the same year as I was, 1973 to 1979. While I was stationed there, I was with the American Forces Korea Network. I was a broadcaster. I did newscasts there, and I did documentaries there and other things. By the way, that cigarette hanging out of my mouth was something that ended when I was 30 years old, so I did quit when I was 30. This picture would have been, I was probably 22, 23 at the time. And while I was in Korea, a couple of very, very amazing things to me happened. I was awoke one morning, and the voice, which I always trusted and listened to, they refer to it as the still soft voice within, rather than the ego voice, which shouts at you and demands that you do certain things. This was a calming, loving voice, and the voice came to me and said, "You need to call your mother back in New York. She needs to hear from you." Now, back in those days, we had exchanged letters every month, and I had no indication that anything was wrong. But as I mentioned, I always listened to that voice. And I called. And in those days, for those who remember, we had extension telephones, wired extension telephones, so you could answer the same phone in two locations. And my sister and my mother answered the phone simultaneously. And I said, "Mom, is there anything wrong?" And my sister exclaimed, "Oh my God, how did he find out?" And it turned out that she was scheduled for major surgery the next day. And the voice told me to tell her the operation would be a complete success. She'd have a rapid recovery. Everything would be just fine. She needed to hear those words from me. And that's actually what transpired. The operation was a complete success. She had a full recovery and she was just fine. I was 6,000 miles away from her at the time. How did I know? Where did that voice come from? What is the nature of the information that we get? And where do we get it from? At that time, I thought perhaps that information was from a spiritual guide, perhaps in the form of an angel. But I had no evidence of that. I just was grateful. I had gratitude for all these pieces of information that would come to me and help me through my life. Also, while stationed in Korea, I was having a problem with my back, the result of an intramural football injury between Army and Air Force personnel who were stationed there in Seoul, Korea. And a friend of mine said, "Have you ever tried or had acupuncture?" And I said, "No, I'd heard of acupuncture, but I never tried acupuncture." So he said, "Why don't you find a Korean acupuncturist to have a treatment, and I'm sure it'll help with the pain." And I found through reference, I asked a couple of people, and someone mentioned this one acupuncturist, and I went and I had the acupuncture treatment. And within 24 hours, the pain was actually gone, and I was grateful for that happening. What I did not know was that in those days, the Korean acupuncturists did not use disposable needles, that their sterilization techniques were not the best, and that hepatitis B was endemic in Korea. Many people carried the virus without manifesting the illness. 2 weeks after the treatment, I woke up one morning and I wasn't feeling well, and I looked at myself in the mirror at the bathroom, and my eyes were turning yellow. And I knew something was wrong, and I went to the base hospital. And as soon as they saw me at the desk, they looked at my eyes and they said, "You have hepatitis," and they admitted me immediately. And they started treating me differently than they were treating the other patients in the ward. They were giving me infusions or injections, rather, of vitamin K. I didn't understand why, and other treatments. And one morning, the doctor came to me and said, "Do you have a will?" And I said, "No, I've never had a will." He says, "Well, you need a will. You're very seriously ill, and we want to make sure you protect your family." And they had the Judge Advocate General's office send over a lawyer who helped me prepare a will. They had also sent a telegram back to my mother in New York saying, "Your son is very seriously ill. His prognosis is not good. We'll keep you informed," which I'm sure made my mother feel very, very happy. In any event, one morning I'm laying there after about a week and a half, and I'm very, very tired and have no energy left. And a voice comes to me in the head again, the same voice, that soft, loving voice, and said, "Ask the doctor to show you something with a picture of a healthy liver." So when the doctor was making the rounds, I said, "Do you have something with a picture of a healthy liver?" He said, "Why?" I said, "I just want to look at it." And he sort of begrudgingly shrugged his shoulders, came back with an anatomy book with a picture of a liver, and handed it to me and left. And I started studying this picture of the healthy liver. And after a few minutes, the voice came back and said, "Put the book down, place your palms over your abdomen, and just relax." And I did. And with my palms over my abdomen, especially over the side with the liver, I started feeling this wonderful warmth and tingling sensation taking place, a very loving sensation. And after some amount of time, I don't remember how long, I fell asleep. The next morning at 5 a.m., the nurse woke me up. She apologized. She said, "We have to take your blood." 2 hours later, she came back and she said, "I'm really sorry. The laboratory messed up your blood specimens. We have to take another draw." An hour later, the doctor came in and said, "After I gave you the book last night, what did you do?" And I told him. He says, "You're crazy." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because last night your liver enzymes were so high, We didn't think you had much time left to live. This morning, they're almost normal, and we've never seen anything like this ever happen before. Well, in my official medical records, after they discharged me, he actually wrote in my military records, "This is the luckiest SOB I've ever met in my entire life." And I didn't consider myself to be lucky. I considered myself to have witnessed and experienced something that was meant to be in my life. And you would think that I would have had an aha moment and jumped up and said, "This is my path from now on." But I still wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to say, "This is my path, the path of healing and the path of doing this work." And my life ensued. And eventually I got out of the Air Force. And then after getting out of the Air Force, I started having a series. I was married. I started having, my daughter was born, who is now 47. She'll be 48 this year. And I started having a series again of these experiences, these synchronicities. And I found the work of Carl Jung, who said that synchronicity is an acausal principle and can be defined by meaningful coincidences which appeared between a mental state and an event occurring in the external world, but without causal connection. When he says acausal, that means without causal connection. They're meaningful experiences without causal connection. And I recognized that in my life, I had been experiencing these throughout my life. And so many of them were just so wonderful. And I'll share some of them with you as we go along. But in addition to having my beautiful daughter and my wonderful daughter, my wife and I had a premature son born. He was born 2 months early. He lasted for 2 weeks and he passed away. And I'm going to bring that back into the story a little bit later. So I go on to my life, and another series of synchronicities start happening. And I just want to share one other thing. I learned about Einstein referring to quantum entanglement as spooky action at a distance. And what that meant was that you could take two particles from the same atom, separate them, and whatever you did to one particle locally would happen simultaneously to the other particle, even though they were far apart. So again, this seemed to talk about this concept of synchronicity, that these coincidences, these things were happening at a distance. And I came to recognize over time with Rabbi Gelberman's teaching, Hakol Beseda, everything is unfolding in divine order. That resonated with me as being an explanation for all of these things that had started happening. And I was able to codify synchronicity and codify quantum entanglement and recognize that all of these things were happening for a reason, whatever that reason might be, to learn, to grow, to make changes in your life, to appreciate with gratitude everything that happens in your life, to appreciate with gratitude everything that happens in your life. So let me tell you about how I got to the new seminary. My spiritual life was expanding and my wife's spiritual life was contracting. In I can't remember the exact year, 1989, again, I was having an issue with my back. And a friend of mine said, "Have you ever tried yoga?" And I said, "No," but I'd heard of yoga. And the local high school in my area had an adult education newspaper that came out. And one of the ads said, "Take yoga classes with Judy Hamsa." And something about the name Hamsa, I didn't know what it meant, appealed to me. And I decided to sign up for those classes. And I met Judy, who became my teacher. We also became very good friends. And during the course of those yoga classes, she said, "I love your voice. Would you be willing to do the meditation, to lead the meditation?" And I said, "Of course." And I started leading meditation classes. And then we would go on these wonderful retreats to a Zen monastery in Livingston Manor, New York. And it would be a gathering of yoga students and teachers, and we do the yoga practice, and we do the meditation, not only the meditations that I would lead, but also meditations with the monks who were at the monastery. And at one of these gatherings, someone mentioned the word Reiki. Now, I'd never consciously heard this in my life, but something about the word Reiki appealed to me. And there were three of us who said, that's interesting. Next year, early next year, let's look into that. Well, that was October of that year. 2 weeks later, we were in our first Reiki class together. And Reiki became the rocket fuel that opened up everything for me, that opened up that path that I had said I'd sort of discarded or not been ready to recognize after my miracle healing when I was in Korea. And so consequently, we were taking the Reiki class, and on the first day of the Reiki class, the Reiki teacher said, place your palms over your heart like this, close your eyes, and see if something comes to you. And while doing this, I didn't really have concept of an angel before. But while doing this exercise, I saw this winged being in my vision, and I recognized it as an angel. And the teacher came around and said, what did you see? And I said, I believe I saw an angel. He said, ask the angel its name, and immediately came to me, Gabriel. So that night I went home, and my daughter, who was 12 or 13 at the time, said, Daddy, what's this Reiki stuff about? And I said, would you like to experience it? She said, yes. I said, have a seat in this chair. And I placed my palms above the back of her head and started getting ready to do the invocation of the energy. And she closed her eyes and she said, Daddy, I'm seeing family members, our family who has passed before. And I said, who do you see? She said, I see Grandpa and Grandma. She started describing them. These were people who, some of them had passed before she was born. She said, Daddy, there's an angel flying above them. I said, what's the angel's name? And she said, Gabriel. So this basically confirmed for me the experience that I had, and perhaps this connection that Gabriel, as a messenger, as a communicator, had something to do with my family. So again, these wonderful experiences were taking place. As I had mentioned before, my marriage, my first marriage, was falling apart. My former wife had become basically a born again, started going to a very, very devout born again church. And she would take my daughter, and I would support her in that. I had no problem supporting her, driving her, setting up chairs in the home for her to have Bible groups. I wanted her to have that happiness. But she kept rejecting everything that I was doing, including the meditation and the Reiki and the yoga. And at some point, my daughter came home from a church session one day, from a gathering, and said, Daddy, Pastor said, if you don't come to our church, you're going to go to hell. And this was not something that I was ready to hear, that I wanted to hear. I did not get upset at my daughter, but I knew that the marriage had to come to an end because I just could not go on doing the things that I knew were my calling, and nothing evil or negative or bad about them, but I knew that I had to pursue them. And so consequently, my first marriage came to an end. I was leading this Friday night meditation group, meditation and healing group, and a friend of mine in the group said, I know this woman who has cancer. She'd be interested in learning more about this work that you do, the Reiki and the meditation and the healing. Would you be willing to meet with her? And I said, yes. And we made arrangements to meet on a Sunday morning. And I knocked on the door and she came to the door. And we looked at each other, having never met before in this life, but we both pointed and said, it's you. We had recognized each other. We had traveled together before. And that began a friendship. And I started doing the healing work with her, meditation work with her. And ultimately, a relationship ensued. And in the course of that relationship, I had mentioned to her that I had wanted to do Reiki in hospitals. And in those days, if you wanted to do anything involved with laying on of hands, which Reiki really isn't direct contact, but anything to do with placing hands near the body or any of that work, you either had to be a licensed massage therapist or ordained in a faith where that type of work is a sacrament. And obviously, with a full-time job in industry and the welding supply industry, I couldn't take off 2 years and go to massage school. But she said, I know this wonderful man, Rabbi Joseph Gelberman, who has this organization called the New Seminary. And you could go there and speak with him and see about learning his practices and becoming ordained as an interfaith minister, which would give you that ability to be able to go in and practice Reiki. So she made an appointment for us to meet with him. The new class was starting. And we met. And as soon as I met him, I recognized him. I knew this was someone who meant something to me in my life before. A teacher, absolutely a teacher before. Someone who reminded me in many ways of my grandfather, but especially a teacher. And he said, you must join the school. And he said to Judy, who was my partner at the time, he said, you will join him in the school. You don't have to pay tuition. I want you both in the class together. You need to be in this class together. And that's what we do. What a generous act and what a wonderful act. And we joined the class together. And as the class ensued, we had our wonderful trainings and we had our wonderful lessons, and so many things opened my mind and my heart. I had the privilege of meeting Dr. John Mundy when I was back there. And in any event, our graduation came in November of 1997. Let me backtrack. And so Judy and I traveled. She had been a special education teacher in a school in Harlem, New York, where she had inspired and turned around the lives of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids who called her mom, who went on to careers and went on to college and did wonderful and amazing things thanks to her encouragement and guidance. In any event, we came to the time of the graduation, and unfortunately she had had a setback of the illness, and the cancer had returned. And I said to her, do you have the strength to sit on the stage and graduate with us, with our class? And she said, yes. And I was the president of the class, and we had our ordination graduation ceremony at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City, a magnificent Episcopal cathedral. And she was there on the stage with my class, with our class, and I was president of the class, and I was giving the speech. And I used the first part of the speech to honor her, to say about all of the wonderful things she had accomplished as a special education teacher, the children she had inspired. And she did all of this undaunted by the challenges of illness. And she started crying and smiling, and I started crying, and I continued on with my speech. Well, that was November of 97. The next week was Thanksgiving. We were back in our home, and we were preparing Thanksgiving dinner for my mother and sister to join us. And she came into the kitchen, and she smelled the food that I was preparing, and she smiled. And all of a sudden, her eyes started rolling back in her head. And I rabbed over to grab her because it looked like she was going to fall, and she collapsed, and I gently led her to the floor. And I called 911, and they took her into the hospital. And the doctor who had been her attending came to me and said, her time is up. She needs to be in hospice. And I said, can I take her home and do home hospice? And he said, if you go for the training, you can. And they sent me for training, home hospice training, and brought her home. And that was November, the end of November, beginning of December of 1997. And during that time, she was in a coma. And I would take care of her. We had a home care attendant come for a few hours during the day, and I'd go to work, and then I'd come from work, and I would spend the rest of the day with her, taking care of her, changing her IVs when necessary, looking over her, sleeping next to her bed at night on the floor, listening for her breathing to make sure she was okay. And Christmas Day of 1997, after being in a coma all that time, she opened her eyes and she looked at me and she said, Victor Fuhrman, what day is this? I said, it's Christmas Day, Judy. I said, Merry Christmas. She said, Merry Christmas. She said, I love you. I said, I love you. She said, would you kill me, please? I said, why? Are you suffering? Are you in pain? She says, no, I don't want you to suffer. I don't want you to be in pain. And I said, Judy, I am here to love you and take care of you until God calls you. That's between you and God. And as long as you're not suffering and in pain, I'll be at your side and I'll love you. And that later that afternoon, she went back into the coma. And then on January 8th of 1998, she transpired. Rabbi Gelberman, and for those who knew Rabbi Roger Ross did her funeral. And many hundreds of the kids came to the funeral, and just people were in tears. People knew her and loved her for everything she did and represented. And I gave her eulogy. And in her eulogy, I had shared what she had done in life. And I also shared that her favorite song was a song that Bette Midler had done called The Rose. And in the title, in the lyrics rather, to the song The Rose, there's a line that says, "When the night has been too heavy and the road has been too long, and you think that love is only for the lucky and the strong, just remember in the winter, far beneath the bitter snows, comes the seed that with the sun's love in the spring becomes the rose." And that was my gift to her, knowing that one day she'd return and have a beautiful life again. And I was grateful for the time that we had together, even though it was only a few years, and grateful for the way she opened my heart fully to the understanding of what life and love was all about. So in any event, after the funeral and the beginning of the next year, I started volunteering for the new seminary. I was doing recording of the sessions and sending them out to long-distance students. I was also leading meditations from time to time and sharing in classes. And while I'm there, this woman keeps smiling at me, and I didn't know who she was. And her dean, who was my classmate in my class, said, "That's Lori Sue Brockway." I said, "Oh, what does she do prior to coming in?" Because everybody had some type of an outside career prior to coming to the seminary, the calling to the seminary. She's the editor-in-chief of Playgirl magazine. I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "I'm no Mr. January. She's not smiling at me." But little did I know, again, here comes the synchronicity, here comes the Hakol Beseda, everything unfolding in divine order. She was in the cathedral that day when I was giving my speech and honoring my Judy. And she said, "Where do you find a man," to herself, "who honors a woman the way this man is honoring this woman?" And it planted a seed. In any event, a friendship ensued, and her son, who was 6 at the time, Alexander, was born with one leg. And he would get around on a rollerblade and a pair of crutches faster than people with 2 legs could run. He was just an amazing young man. And when we were giving the synagogue services, the rabbi had the new synagogue on Friday nights. And he would hang back with me and watch me work with the microphones. He was interested in all the equipment that I was working with, and had this big smile on his face. And later that year, Lori Sue called me that there was a health challenge with Alex. And I was at work at the time, and she said, "I don't want to bother." I said, "You're not bothering me." I said, "There is nothing more important than to have this conversation about Alex's health." And I did, and I supported her, and he became okay. In any event, so our relationship ensued. We fell in love. And 2 years later, we got married. And Alex became my stepson. And this next picture shows you. By the way, I weighed a lot more than back then than I did. I've lost considerable amount of weight since those days. But that's Alex in the front, and that's Rabbi Gelberman on the side, and that's Lori Sue in the middle. And he married us, and our relationship began, and she had graduated from the school. And so you had 2 interfaith ministers in the same house. Well, what does that mean, these 2 interfaith ministers in the same house? Well, we were doing different things. She was called to do weddings and also the feminine divine. I was called more so, I did some weddings, but I was called more so to work with people who were suffering loss of family members, to comfort those who were grieving. And that was my main calling back then. And we talk about synchronicity and everything unfolding in divine order. I had gone to the seminary so that I could be ordained and be able to go into a hospital and do Reiki. She had been ordained as a following of the feminine divine, which is a story unto itself, and also to do weddings and to do interfaith weddings. And that was her practice. And she's done amazing weddings with people of different faiths and different backgrounds, and just fabulous. When the New York City approved gay weddings. She did one of the first gay weddings at City Hall. We've both done gay weddings since that time. And just given people the opportunity to express their love to one another. So in any event, you would think that was our calling. That was all there was for us. Well, in 9/11, I was out in Billings, Montana. I was at a business conference out there, and Lori Sue was back in New York in her apartment. We hadn't gotten together yet. I hadn't been married yet. And she and I were watching CNN. We had CNN on. It was 7 o'clock out in Billings, Montana. It was 9 o'clock in New York. And all of a sudden, the bulletin broke about the plane crashing into the first tower. And we were looking at it together. And within a couple of minutes, the second plane crashed. And we knew this was no accident. So Alex was attending a school for the Henry Viscardi School here out in Long Island for children who had physical challenges. And she said, I've got to get him out of the school and get him to safety. And I was able to get out of Billings, Montana that Friday. The first plane I could get was that Friday, got it out of there to Denver, and then from Denver into Newark Airport because the New York airports were still closed. I took a cab back to her apartment. We reunited. And she had told me that she had gone to the Red Cross the previous days, that they had opened up a place called the Family Assistance Center with the city of New York on the west side of Manhattan in a pier, and they were looking for chaplains. So the next day, that Saturday, we both went to the Red Cross and we studied the chaplaincy study, and we were both given chaplaincy credentials. And we started going to that Family Assistance Center. We do our day jobs by day. She was working as an editor on a website, and I still had my day job in industrial technology in the welding industry. And by night, we would go to the Family Assistance Center, and there we would work with those who were waiting for word of their missing loved ones or knew that their loved ones had perished in 9/11. And we would pray with them, listen to them. That was the big deal. Listening. Listening was something very important, because listening during the grieving process gives the person a chance to express their grief. And listening, giving them sacred space to grieve, is so important. And we did that for the next 2 months. So here, she had a motive for going to the seminary. I had a different motive for going to the seminary. And yet, Hakol Beseda, everything unfolding in divine order. And here we were, acting as chaplains for the Red Cross. And other callings have come through. I was part of paranormal teams here in New York City. And the few occasions that we did find disembodied spirit, I would have a conversation with spirit and ask the spirit if it wanted to go on. And with permission, I would talk it through to the other side. So again, these wonderful opportunities to do all of these things and be helpful. And the other thing that happened was, in my day job, I would often encounter situations where I could give a spiritual message to my coworkers who were going through some kind of an angst, some kind of a problem. And a friend of mine about 20 years ago, who knew about both sides of my life, the day job and the spiritual work, said, how do you balance the fact that you have this day job in industrial technology and the spiritual work that you do? And without even giving it a second thought, I said, the day job pays my salary. I said, the other work pays my soulary. And this word soulary came out of me. Lori Sue, in her marketing wisdom, said, you gotta copyright that. So I copyrighted, or registered, trademarked rather, soulary. And I am in the process of putting together a book called Soulary, The Compensation of Spirit. And I hope to have that published sometime next year. So all these wonderful things transpired. And you could say that in my earlier days, I started thinking about the possibility of angelic things. I started thinking about some of the contact with being extraterrestrial beings, or my teachers, whoever they may be. And then later on, understanding the spiritual nature of all of these things. And all I have to say is to Rabbi Gelberman, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your spirit. Thank you for reopening me to all of these things and making me recognize that everything was unfolding in divine order, and will always be grateful to the rabbi for everything that he did. And that's the end of my base presentation. Let me just stop the share for a second. I'm going to add a couple of things to it. When Lori Sue showed me a picture of Alexander as an infant, my eyes opened and I started getting a little teary. Alexander's face was the identical face of the 2-year or the 2-week-old child that I lost, the boy that I lost in my first marriage. I recognized his face. So Alexander, my stepson, was truly my son. My son, come back to me. Everything unfolding in divine order. One of the other things that's been a blessing in my life is I have been sharing poetry, inspired poetry throughout my life. And I'm going to share one with you now that came through me a couple of years ago. Let me see if I can share this. I might be able to share this on the screen. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I can share this. One of the blessings of our home is that we have a very small garden in the front. And one of the poems that came to me a few years ago was about azaleas. They would come in the spring, last about 3 or 4 weeks, and then they would die. And the lesson of the azaleas came to me in this inspired poem. They return each spring in their full glory without our hand intending. Leave in 3 weeks a very short story, but no sadness in this ending. For they grace us with signs of summer's return, lifting our spirits with cheer. And we know they'll be back and blossom again, one full turn of the wheel of the year. And the lesson they share with beauty and grace, transition is just nature's way. A reminder we will all return to this place and blossom on some shining day. And I'm grateful again for that gift of inspired poetry. And I'll share one more poem with you and then we'll open up for questions. My mother passed in January of 2020, and I was at her bedside when she passed. And when we were there, my sister and I were there, and I was holding her hand, and I was talking her over to my dad because I knew it was her time. And I said, Mama, I said, Daddy's waiting for you. Go to him. He's calling to you. And when he had first passed away, he passed away when I was 15. There was a song by Bobby Goldsboro called Honey. And the lyric went, and honey, I miss you, and I'm being good, and I'd long to be with you, if only I could. And I said, Mama, he's singing to you, and honey, I miss you, and I'm being good, and I'd long to be with you, if only I could. And within a few minutes, she transitioned. While she transitioned, I was holding her hand, and I started seeing this vision of circles and rings. Circles and rings. And I didn't understand what they meant at the time. But a short time after, a poem came through me called Circles and Rings, and I'll share that with you now. The path of great beauty in so many things, from atoms to galaxies, circles and rings. Natural wisdom that dwells there within, from naught to 360, that magical spin. We circle each other in gravity's dance, as Gaia circles Sol, the solar romance, as Luna circles us in life-giving motion, drawing the tides and inner emotion. And the age of the oak is found in its rings, as in woman and man and all living things. And when the rings stop and life comes to an end, we'll all circle back and dance once again. Circles and rings. And again, Hakol Beseda, everything unfolding in divine order. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you. And now I guess I'll open to questions.
That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a very powerful message. I was touched countless times as you shared your story, Victor. That was just a lifetime of experience that you condensed down into these incredible highlights. And this underlying message of Hakol Beseda is just powerful. It really is. I think that many of us have recognized the truth of that without verbalizing it, and it's so beautifully understood by the rabbi. So thank you for
And,
sharing all that.
thank you, Reverend Dr. Budd. And this is available to every one of us, every sentient human being. Everyone can do this, can recognize this if they open their hearts to it.
I think that's the key, opening up your heart.
That's it.
It starts right here.
That's
It's
it.
so powerful. We do have a question in chat,
Okay.
and Lorraine would like to know if you've met anyone who was reincarnated post World War II.
You know something? I haven't thought about that. Um, I probably have, but I haven't really focused on that. So that's something that I would not have known.
There's a lot of people who I've spoken with who have had memories of experiences in World War II on one side or another, interestingly enough.
I can share one memory that I have. When I was a kid, I was enamored with the work of Edgar Allan Poe.
Mm.
And I thought that I may have been the reincarnation of Edgar Allan Poe from a previous lifetime. I've never pursued that. I've never done any past life regressions or anything like that. But when I was 13, this poem came through me called Injustice. And I think my Edgar Allan Poe-ishness brought it through. It said, "The block was closed around my neck. The splintered hole burned my neck sore. The blade would come tumbling to my neck, and I would see daylight no more. The king had summoned me to death. He said that I had been disloyal. Soon I would swallow my last breath to end a life of stress and toil. And now the black masked man he comes to release the blade of destiny. Spot, spot, spot. 'Twas not the blade that gave me death. The crime of injustice gave death to me." I'm 13 years old.
Wow. And you've since written poetry nevermore?
No, I've written poetry, many more.
I couldn't resist.
Thank you.
That's terrific. That's wonderful. Anyone else have a question? Anything they'd like to ask of Reverend Victor? Why do you think these things happened to you in your life?
Because I was ready to receive them.
You were ready to
And
receive.
I think that being ready to receive, I would have to, I'll give you another quick example. My wife and son and I are on the local parkway, Grand Central Parkway here, a couple of years ago. And everything's moving at speed limit, no problems, no issues, nothing we could see. And the voice came to me and said, "Get out of this lane now." I was in the extreme left lane. And we got into, and I listened to the voice and I got into the right lane. 10 seconds later, there was a multiple car accident, and we would have been in that accident had I stayed in the left lane. I'm receptive to the voice. And I think every one of us hears that voice. But some of us don't know what to do or don't trust it. And again, the difference between the voices, you have the screaming, shouting voice. That's the ego voice. That's not the one to listen to. It's that soft, what they call the still soft voice within. That's the voice to listen to. And I believe that's the answer. And again,
Well,
everyone can do it. Everyone can do it. Just listen. You know, one of the things that I started teaching is if you have a question that you don't have an answer to, and you want that answer, ask the question to yourself and then listen for the answer and watch what happens. And be patient. And if it's not the answer you're anticipating, listen to it again and find out why. I think we all can do this.
that answers the next question of how can we connect and trust that quiet inner voice?
Right.
And
Ask. I'll give you another example, and then I'll go specifically. Do we have to be still? You know what? Some people, it's not a voice, it's a feeling. They don't, in other words, there's clairaudient and clairsentient feeling. That's the same as experiencing it in any other way. Whatever sense that you've developed, that sixth sense that you've developed, that's where your answer is going to come from. So it doesn't have to be clairvoyance.
we've all had that experience of losing our car keys, as an example, right? And then it's somewhat challenging. We can if we can finally get over the panic of losing the car keys and get to that still space and ask the car keys, where are you? You might get an answer. Or if you have a guide, you can ask your guide, where are my car keys? But it's that stillness that has to happen after the question to allow the response to come in, where however it comes in, whichever chakra, whichever alignment you have in the in the clair situation. Yeah.
And just to address the other aspect of getting ready to listen or hear or feel whichever the clairs that you have developed, follow Reverend Keith's practice of taking some deep breaths. Sit, ground yourself, sit in a chair firmly, take a few deep breaths, and then ask the question. And you don't have to verbalize the question. If that doesn't work, you can think the question and get the same type of result depending upon which of the senses you've developed for listening. I just want to share one other thing. They talked about recognizing people who had served in World War II, not specifically. I have been doing these wonderful interviews for Om Times Radio now since 2016. We met, Lori Sue and I were co-officiating a wedding, and they were in the wedding party. And we started talking, and I had been doing some podcasting before that. And they said, we love your voice. Would you like to join us? And I said, yes. So, and again, happening in divine order. And during the course of these interviews that I've been doing, especially the last 5 years, within a few minutes of talking to somebody, I recognize them. And I say, I've traveled with this person before. I can't tell you what lifetime, where it's been, but I recognize them. I know them. And I ask, do you have the sense that we've been together before? And he said, yes. So again, everything unfolding in divine order. And some of them have actually become very close friends.
That's synchronicity. And it's something we're going to talk about actually next month.
Next
Seeker's Compass. It's a whole lot of talking about coincidence, which I call God winks. And it's something to pay attention to. It's not just oh yeah, okay, whatever. Stop, pause, explore it, find out a little bit more.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We've got a couple of other fun questions here.
Please.
In this framework, divine order brings synchronicity, sometimes revealing a challenge or a call to act. So is it the divine that reveals our direction?
I believe it is. I believe it is. What is the divine? This really comes down to the question of what is the divine, really? How do we see the divine? And I see the divine as the source of everything, as the source of all of creation, as the source of all energy, as the source of all blessings, and also as the source of all lessons.
Yeah, all goodness.
Do I codify it as God? Yes. But I don't pigeonhole it into God as let me rephrase that. I would call it God, the ultimate source of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the other aspect of it is you don't have to look out there to find it. It's in here too. One of the wonderful lessons that I learned about through one of the authors that I interviewed was a text coming out of the old Hindu texts, where the Brahma was having a gathering of all of the deities, of all of the Hindu deities. And they were all complaining because humans in those days also had divine abilities. And one of the deities said, why don't you hide the divine on the top of the highest mountain so the humans will never find it? And he says, no. He says, even on top of the highest mountain, the humans will be able to find it. And another deity says, why don't you put it in the bottom of the deepest ocean? The humans will never think of looking for it there. And he said, ultimately, the humans will go to the bottom of the deepest ocean and they'll find it there. And then Brahma said, I know what I'll do. I'll hide it inside the humans because they'll never think of looking for it there. And when they say namaste, when people bow and say namaste to each other, it's saying the divine with me bows and within me bows and recognizes the divine within you.
Yes, that recognition of the divine spark.
So you don't have to look for it out there. It's right here.
And I also know that Reverend Keith has a comment that he would like to ask. Reverend Keith, did you want to say something?
With synchronicity, I just wanted to add about our attention, right? Our attention is really the only thing we have some control over, right? The rest is kind of flowing in that divine order. So where is your attention? Is synchronicity, it's happening everywhere, all the time. And what is religion? Religion is an observance, right? All religions are observance. Observances of what? Observances of your attention in the moment. Anything else is a distraction.
I have an answer to that.
Ah, I didn't know there was a question, but it's good there's an answer.
And then we're gonna call Reverend Mundy. Will be Reverend Dr. Mundy afterwards. I see he raised his hand. Every time I've been presented with one of these synchronicities, one of these Hakol Beseda moments, I have three choices. I could dismiss it out of hand, saying that doesn't resonate with me. I could say, you know what, that's interesting, but maybe not right now. Maybe later on. Maybe it's not my time for this yet. Or I can say yes with a capital Y. And it turned out that every time I've said yes with a capital Y, the next one would come, and the next one would come, and the next one would come. That's my answer to what you're saying. How do you recognize it? Well, you recognize it when it happens. If you're open to it, if you open your mind and open your heart, you'll recognize it. And then you have a choice. And it's in the choice that we make the decision.
So you don't get caught up in the next moment, or I don't have time for this, or yeah, so staying with that.
If someone came to you and handed you a beautiful gift, what would you do? Would you go into the next moment, or would you look at that gift, embrace it, express gratitude? Gratitude is a big deal. Gratitude is one of the biggest deals in all of this stuff. I'll share a quick story about that later, but gratitude is so important. I am so thankful. I am grateful for the opportunity, for the moment, for the synchronicity, for the information, for the opportunity.
I think true gratitude is the highest expression of love that we can do in this world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Reverend Dr. John Mundy.
Well, all I wanted to say was I find that one of the best times for this receptivity is right in first thing in the morning as I'm waking up. And I just don't jump up unless you gotta go to the bathroom or something. But I mean, just lay there and just see, because your mind is fresh, and especially if you've actually got something on the back of the mind. I'm often working on a writing project, and I'll be kind of like, what's next on that? And it'll just become so clear that it's almost like get thee to the computer, you know? I'm sure other people have that same thing. That's just a simple thing, but it works. It really works.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Did I miss anybody's question so far? If anybody missed a question, why don't you raise your hand or
Yeah, there's a couple more here that we've got. So you became a Reiki master, yes?
yes.
Are you still practicing?
I don't have an active practice. If I'm called to do Reiki work, but I'll share a wonderful experience that I had a long time ago. A friend of mine used to hold these Reiki marathons where someone who was really ill would come, and Reiki people would volunteer and go to this woman's house and take turns at the table with this person. And I was my turn. I didn't know anything about her other than her first name. And she had cancer of the ovarian cancer, which they told us. And I was working down on her abdomen, and two names came to me. And I asked her, who are, and I mentioned the two names. And she looked at me and she said, it's my husband and my son. And I said, what do you feel about them? And she says, I feel as if they've abandoned me. So, and she started crying, and we continued with the Reiki. She actually had a recovery from that cancer, even though she wasn't expected to recover. I'm not taking credit for that, but that information was given to me, Hakol Beseda. It happened in divine order, synchronicity, and I was able to help her reflect upon that. And that's it.
Sometimes that's the point of it, is what is the underlying lesson?
Absolutely.
If we really understand this concept of we are immortal beings having a temporary human experience, the question is, during that incarnation, during this incarnation, what is it that I'm here to do? What am I trying to learn? What am I trying to accomplish? And it isn't on the physical plane. It is, these questions are solely at the higher level, at the spiritual level, at the question of what is it that each of us are being asked to explore, to understand? And from my perspective, all of these questions, all of these experiences are here to help us remove the obstacles to the awareness of divine presence. That's what each of these major or minor, simple little awarenesses, simple acknowledgments to the big, giant road bumps that we have in our life, they all have an underlying lesson. And that goal is still the same. It's that same goal that's expressed in a bazillion different ways, because we're all each unique individuals. We all have to have our own path through the morass of life, and understand that those experiences are specifically part of our curriculum, part of our
Absolutely.
awakening process.
Absolutely. Did I miss anybody's questions?
One more question that is kind of an interesting one. Sometimes I feel there's something in my presence when I am alone, but I don't understand what to do.
Okay. When you say something is in your presence, is it an energy that you feel?
She says, yes, but real.
Okay. All righty. All righty. Have you ever asked, who is this?
No, I was afraid.
Okay. Um, the energy that you sense in that presence, were you afraid because it was invisible, or you were afraid because you felt something wrong with it, or that something was off with it? Nothing wrong. Okay. All righty. Had you lost someone recently when you first started sensing that energy? And this could even be a pet, by the way. Doesn't have to be a human relative. It could be an animal companion.
Okay, great. I was trying to figure out how to do it. Yeah, no, a lot of family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone recent?
It all seems recent. It all seems like in a spare moment. I feel them. My brother is most recent.
Okay.
Heartache.
Okay. Alrighty. Prior to your brother's passing, did you sense this energy?
Oh yes, to the point where I stopped meditating.
Oh.
I just stopped. It was too scary. And I know I shouldn't be afraid, because I'm supposed to ask for the removal of blocks to love's awareness, but it is overwhelming. I stopped even turning into Dr. Monday's things, you know.
What would it mean to you if you were able to connect with this energy and find out who it is and the message that they might have for you?
I think that I'd have to do something more to accept what's going on, not in this earth right now, I guess. I just have to become more like you guys, not frightened and just accepting. But I live in this material world, and it's hard.
Okay. I can share with you that I feel presence of disembodied energy all the time.
Oh.
And I have never had an experience that was frightening in any way. I've never had an experience that I ever regretted. And sometimes I ask for the actual contact. I'll give you an example. Sometimes I'm thinking about something and I have to make a decision, and it's a really difficult decision. And when I have that sense, I feel this hand brushing the hair on the back of my head, And I know it's my mother comforting me and telling me it's okay. I know it's her.
Okay. I know it's them too. I know it's somewhere deep inside. It's just it shouldn't be happening, I think. I don't know. Should it be happening?
No, if it's a gift, if you're feeling it, it's a gift. And I'm not telling you wrong or right. It's a gift. If you choose to accept it, there's something there for you. If you choose not to accept it, that's okay too. And you have the right to say thank you, but I'm not interested. You
Okay,
have
when
that
I was
right.
24 years old, I'm 60 now. I heard, and they were calling, somebody was calling me, and I said, stop it, I don't want to hear this. So was that a mistake? Is that a mistake? Because you sound
No,
nuts. And when I told somebody about it, they uh, told other people, and then of course it makes you look weird to people who are not like you guys.
no, not at all. Not at all. I think, it's a choice. You have a choice. One of the things that it's funny working on paranormal teams. One of the things that I've discussed with paranormal investigation, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. 1 out of 10 times there'll be a presence there. It won't be something, some type of electrical malfunction or whatever, something in the house that's wrong, physical, material thing. And when we identify that, I would make contact and I'd ask the people, number one, are you aware of this person? And if they said no, then I'd ask the being, the entity, the spirit, the disembodied spirit, would you like to move on? And if I heard yes, I would talk it through. And if I heard no, I'm not going to challenge that. It has its right to be there for whatever reason it's there. So you're a medium, by the way. I can tell you right now that you're a medium. You're a gifted medium. And that's the reason why you're so sensitive to the energy. And being someone who is sensitive to the energy and having mediumistic skill, you may want to explore that, You may want to explore that. You may want to work with someone here who does this work.
I was raised Catholic, and it's a big no-no. Just saying. But you shouldn't. There's a comedian, Catherine Madigan. She says you have to go through the saints. You can't talk directly to God. That's how they kind of like I was raised. But I had a good
Intermediate.
background, and I'm not. It sounds like I'm complaining, but anyway, I don't want to hog up the time. I just wanted to know. So just invite them and whatever, because I have no training in talking to people except through prayer. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have a suggestion for you, Mary.
Okay.
When you feel comfortable and you feel fully present, sit down in a room, put a chair out in front of you at a comfortable distance, and close your eyes and invite that person, whoever that is, to sit in that chair and have a conversation with you.
Okay.
And just be open and spend time in silence, spend time in awakening.
So you asked them in your head to talk to you. I'm doing this like a mental
Yes.
connection, not a verbal out loud.
Yes. Well, you can
Okay.
ask out loud. Nothing wrong with that. And for a lot of people, they do. They will have an external conversation because it helps to make it a lot more real for them. It just
Okay, because
depends
talk
on.
about synchronicity. This happened last night, and then I opened up and I get Reverend Mundry's email, which I get every Sunday anyway, and love and read and thank you, sir. And then I'm like, oh, then I check out the speaker, who was lovely, and then the meditation, and then I tried not to pay attention, but I was paying attention the whole time. So now I'm going to zip it, and I'm going to let you guys ask other questions, but I'm very appreciative, and I will try that chair thing.
Mary, if you like, I'd be happy to have a further conversation with you offline. It's your choice. And can I give my email, or do you want to give her my email? Or
Yeah, as you wish.
It's reikivictor@gmail.com.
Okay.
Very easy.
And Mary,
Yeah.
the church has a very rich tradition of mystics. I mean, the Christian mystics I mean, when you go to church on Sunday, it's not as acknowledged, but the Christian mystics are the bedrock of Christianity. As and there's a new book that came out by actually our speaker in December. In December, the Sunday right before Christmas, we're going to have Carl McCullum, and he writes a lot on Christian mysticism. But he just put out a book, read the Bible like a mystic, a small little book. But he's a very dynamic speaker. He's online a lot, and that might be a place to help you kind of with the bridge a little bit, so you feel it's a little more cohesive.
Thank you, everybody.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. You're
Yeah,
welcome.
and I'll email you. Thank you.
And I'll say one last thing about this. The presence of those who we've loved and have moved on is a great gift, a very, very special gift. It really is. Because it's an extension of the love that they shared with you when they were alive.
And it makes me less sorrowful. I think, oh, they're here. I at least because it's overwhelming, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
It can be
So thank you for sharing.
it can be overwhelming, but just stay grounded. You know, breathe, talk, connect with nature, go outside, touch the ground. You know, stay grounded with your breath and with nature. Stay grounded.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
And go back to Dr. John's classes, please.
He's wonderful. Yes, thank you.
He is wonderful. Okay, other questions then? See?
We have one more. German, would you like to come forward and share your question?
Now we'll be here for another hour. Yes.
German
Well,
always
it's
has the deep questions. I love that.
It's a scientist in me, which is basically what my question is about. It's when you know I was raised Catholic. I'm a rebellious Catholic, still kind of don't believe in church basically, and always had this impression that all of this imagery in the church is something feeble and some creation, some story. Is not it doesn't have the concreteness of sensorial experiences or anything. And the more I try to understand what images and creations and concepts and brain functioning is about, I think that it's possible, and that's my question. Could all these visions and all these images that come to us can only be a combination of our neural structures interacting in certain ways that are a response to our sensorial world? So we know birds, for example. We know creatures that are very beautiful, and so we create this in our brains, conjure these images and these creatures, which they become, oddly enough, they become things that you're supposed to believe in such concrete ways that actually turns off, in many instances, the people like me who I feel I have a need to have a connection to the world that I can explain and that I can reproduce, and that others can feel the same way. So, which doesn't deny in my way of seeing things. It doesn't deny a divine force. It doesn't deny something that is behind all of this. That is putting all this together for this instance of the universe that we live in. And so, yeah, that's basically I guess it's a combination of a question and a comment.
And my answer to you would be everything is energy. If we take from the standpoint of science, let's go straight to science. Everything is energy. Everything material is energy. And what the laws say is that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but changes from form to form, right? The second law of thermodynamics, or the first law, it's been a long time for me studying this stuff. So if everything is energy, what is the essence of who we are? The spirit, the soul, the being outside of the body. Take the body away, take the brain away. What are we? Are we a form of energy? And if we're a form of energy, even when the container ceases to exist, that energy goes on. The soul, the spirit, whatever you want to call it. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think I do think that that energy exists in everything that we can detect and that we can perceive. We can.
And I'll share it from a different standpoint, a different example. Probably everybody here has read one of the books, such as The Secret or The Laws of Manifestation, or any of those books that were very popular maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. I am a strong believer, not a believer, practitioner, in the fact that if we want to manifest something, we can, in working with energy. And the concept of the manifestation comes from two things. Number one, it's not something it's not something we say we want. It's something we say we see, it physically exists, it's there right now. The energy is formed into what the outcome is. And number two, we're grateful for it. And I'll give you a quick example. A friend of mine had been working as a social worker and very happy at the place she was working. And the company that owned that decided to sell, and they sold, and the new management was not the nicest in the world. And basically, she and others lost their positions. And so consequently, she was looking for another job. And I was speaking with her and giving her some coaching. And I said, why don't you visualize that the ideal job you want, with the compensation, with the treatment, the wonderful treatment by management, is not something that you want, but something that already exists. Visualize it in your mind. See it there. And as you're seeing it there, and say, and I'm so grateful for this. Do this as an exercise when you wake up in the morning, a couple of times a day. She started doing it. 2 days later, she got a call from a company that was looking for someone with her background. They interviewed her, and they hired her at a higher level of compensation, and she loves the people she works with. Energy. Energy followed by gratitude. It's real, it's there, it exists, it's in form, and I'm so grateful.
German, I have another little spin for you from a scientific perspective. You're talking about neural tracks, right? And I could go on and on about that and the neural net. I've studied it deeply, but I just want to throw in a little caveat. Who are you without your body? And I'll leave it at that. So thank you. We do have our questions that we like to ask our Compass attendees and our amazing, wonderful guest today. So let me just share those questions. And we have already heard from you portions of your spiritual path. I get the feeling that this could go on for hours if we were to really delve into your spiritual path, Victor. It's been rich, as many of the mystics who have joined us here are, and that's been powerful. So let's talk about the divine, one of my favorite topics. How and when do you experience the divine?
Would guess I experience the divine in seeing everything in creation, and as I see it, expressing my gratitude for it. That poem that came through me about the azaleas, I have daily conversations with squirrels and birds every day. I'm grateful for that. I actually had a squirrel that I called Oliver, because after he'd eat the nut that I gave him, he'd come back like this and say, "Sir, can I have some more, please?" But all of creation, the trees, I love trees. I hug trees. I was a 70s tree hugger. I mean, just anything and everything in creation to me is a blessing and a gift and a miracle. And I see
Have
them
you
as
ever
such.
hugged a giant sequoia?
No, I have not been out to California by the sequoias. No,
Or
no,
that, or touch one of the ancient trees that are hundreds of years old?
no.
That's an experience that you need to do.
I will look forward to that. But that's how I experience. I look at the sky, I look at the clouds. I wrote a poem called Sacred to Me. If you give me a second, I think that'll explain everything. It'll be a lot faster. Let me just open up the.
Perfect.
I have been waiting for what was going to explain everything, Victor. Thank you.
It's not 42?
Well, while Victor looks that up, Herman, to get back to your question about, is our neurology, we experience, as far as we can tell, we experience everything through our central nervous system. It's how we take information in. Just looking at the electromagnetic spectrum, there's all kinds of things in the electromagnetic spectrum, and we have different instruments that can measure the different vibrations of energy and put it into a form that we can then digest. And when we sit and we meditate and we are changing the receptivity of our own nervous system and able to change to the different channels of the energy that's there. Ultimately, it's all one energy. But so the electromagnetic spectrum is really all one energy, right? But we can see it, in all different ways. And so we get to experience what Victor was saying before, that essence of God, that essence of, and why does that resonate with us? Because that's what we are. Right? We're just kind of experiencing ourself in its most, truest essence. And so why does everyone talk about it as love? All the mystics love, 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 love. It's just because it's you.
Yeah. A friend of mine asked me about my interfaith path, and I started thinking, and he also asked me what I considered sacred. And so this poem came through me, and I shared it with him, and he really got it. The warmth of the sun upon the face, a gentle hug or compassionate embrace, someone to listen when we need to be heard, someone to share their wisdom and word, the vows of a couple as husband and wife, the cry of a newborn as it begins life, the comfort of family as we draw our last breath, the promise of rebirth vanquishing death, the glory of nature, earth, sea, and sky, the beauty of birds as they soar by, glorious flowers, green plants, and great trees, the industrious work of insects and bees. In each of these things we see the divine, the work of creation, all things to align, each one a miracle for all eyes to see. Each one is precious and sacred to me.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I so echo that. That is absolutely fabulous.
Thank you.
Well, I guess that moves right into our next question is, what do you experience? And this is both sensate and beyond, when you are deeply aware of, immersed in, feel divine presence.
Gratitude.
Uh,
The G word. G. God starts with G and gratitude starts with G.
Indeed.
And that's really what it's about for me. It's funny. I've come to a point in my life. I'm 72. And I've come to a point in my life, the last few years, not just now, but that I am so grateful for everything that's happened in my life up to this point and continues to happen every day, and the opportunity to share with everyone here today. I'm so grateful that I do not have any fear. I truly have no fear. I am filled with this gratitude and love. And if I was called home tomorrow, okay, I'm ready. Not that I want to be, but if I'm called home tomorrow, I'm ready. There's nothing that I am afraid of in that regard. And I know that I've had wonderful opportunities to extend my heart, my service time, acts of kindness to others. And I'm grateful for those opportunities. And I'm grateful. You know, that's really what it comes down to. I'm grateful.
That's fabulous. That's wonderful. So you've shared a lot of the challenges that you've had on your mystical path, speaking to obviously a lot of people in our group are active in the spiritual world. What kind of challenges have you had? Because you've had both feet in on both sides. What things have you run into in your experience?
I think when someone that doesn't really grasp or understand what a spiritual path is about or a mystical path is about, it's hard to explain to them. And I try to use some of these wonderful things that have happened in my life, always closing with gratitude. But I'll share a quick story about something that happened several years ago. I had a friend who was very challenged by people's opinions. And we were at a dinner one night, and someone made a remark. I think it was a political remark, something that he disagreed with. And he was the type of person, and I know where this came from in his life because he had challenges when he was a kid. But anytime anyone said anything of that nature, he would start screaming and shouting, "How dare you say something like that? Where do you get those ideas from?" Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have a table of people's 8 people having dinner, and his wife and my partner Judy at the time, who was alive, and everyone else at the table got up and walked away. And I walked around the table, and he was standing up, and I threw my arms around him, and I said, I'm not going to mention a name. I said, I love you. I love you just the way you are. And he started crying. And I held him while he cried. And slowly other people started coming back and embracing him. And I think that's the greatest gift we can give. The gift of sacred listening, the gift of not judging someone, the gift of returning love to anger. And I think that has been something that's been manifest in my path.
That's beautiful. That's powerful. And being able to move through those challenges is so important. We can run into situations where we feel challenged and we run away, just like your guests did, or we can stop and embrace it and change everything just by doing that. That's a wonderful physical demonstration of that. So what do you love about your path?
Everything. Everything. It just, every day something new comes, a new lesson, new information, new affirmation of what I'm doing. And it's funny, because of the friendships on Facebook is one thing that's just kind of weird. You have all these people you're friends with on Facebook, 99% of them you never met. And I get these emails from time to time, and someone says, I just want to let you know, remember that time that you gave me some words or whatever it might have been? It changed my life. Thank you. I'm grateful. And I even remember that time. But I just know that I've done something, that I put the word out there, whatever it might be, the emotion, the word, the act of whatever is act of kindness, whatever it might be. And that it confirms for me, this is the right thing to do. This is the right path.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah. It is surprising, though. Many mystics ask and answer that question in the exact same way.
Mm.
They love everything about their path. So do you have a spiritual practice? Is there something that you do every day, every week, every month, every year? Is there something that allows you to go through that process of reminding yourself to connect to the divine?
Every day, and this is something that I started when my day job per se came to an end. But my morning starts out with John had said, talking about laying in bed and not getting up and going through, and I have a meditation every morning. And I also start thinking about things, and a lot of ideas, a lot of my poetry actually comes to me when I first wake up in the morning. And so that's my practice on a daily basis. And then we participate in various things, just like everyday folks do. But I think that concept of just being in that mindfulness every day, that's what it's about for me.
That's the key. That's the key. One of the comments that one of our mystics shared was identifying when you're not thinking about the divine,
Mm,
and then moving and collapsing that space, making it less and less.
mm, yeah, absolutely.
And I've put into chat the link to your website, victorthevoice.com, and it has a number of links to your podcasts on it as well. So there's opportunities for people to participate. But how else might a new seeker join you on this path?
One of first of all, that website's needs a little work. It's something that I've neglected, unfortunately, for the last few years, and I have to really start working on. But again, my concept, what I would share, the one teaching I would share with everyone is if you're missing something in your life, don't see it as missing. Don't see it as something you want and can't get or don't have. Manifest it. Visualize what you truly want. It's funny. I used to teach salespeople in the industry that I was in. And I would say a customer comes to you or comes to the counter and wants to buy a drill bit. What do they really want? They look at me like they want a drill bit. I said, no, but what do they really want? And maybe one out of the 10 or 12 who were in the room would say, they want to make a hole. Oh, yeah, that's what they really want. They want to make a hole. And if they want to make a hole, in addition to the drill bit, what do they need? Well, they have the drill. Obviously, they're asking for the bit. But perhaps they need safety gear. Perhaps they need some type of lubricant for drilling the hole. Perhaps they need something something else that's involved. After the hole is drilled, do they need hardware to put through the hole? And I said, by doing this, by asking these questions, number one, a lot of times customers would run in, grab an item, and then leave, and then come back 20 minutes or an hour later. I forgot this, I forgot that. I said, you're taking ownership of customer satisfaction. You're asking the customer, you're showing that customer that you really care. It's not just about making a couple of bucks from a drill bit. You want to make sure that they're able to do the job that they've come here to do. And so you're taking ownership of customer satisfaction. And then I used to say, if you take the R and the E out of the R and the W out of ownership, you end up with one ship. And it's the one ship we're all sailing on or sinking on together. So be on that one ship. And I think that for people, to getting back to your direct question about joining on the path, is what do you really want? What do you want to find out? What's missing in your life right now that would make your life so much better? And then don't see it as missing. See it as a fait accompli. See it as something that already exists, that you're grateful for, and then have it happen.
Fabulous. I can't think of a better way to wrap up this entire experience than with what you just said. Thank you so much for joining us on the Seeker's Compass. This has been a complete pleasure. And I do hope that we continue to feel and experience your presence at the seminary. It's a blessing. It's a blessing.
And my
Thank you so
gratitude for
much,
giving
Victor.
me the opportunity to move forward with Rabbi's words and Rabbi's wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for participating. We've appreciated you. and hope that you go forward with joy, happiness, and gratitude. And we will be back next month. So take care, everyone. Thank you.